But happiness is defined as what you have divided by what you want. And lot of your pursuit is about increasing the numerator, right? What you have. You now have this car, now you want a bigger car, then you get a bigger car, you want an even bigger car. But the true key to happiness is minimizing the denominator of what you want, right? So if it is what you have divided by what you want, I think if you can minimize the what you want, that is a better way of reaching lasting happiness than just being on the hedonic treadmill of trying to increase the numerator.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am Vishal Khandelwal and this is the 1% Show. This is an open-ended exploration into the minds of the wisest people around to help us learn to think, invest and live each day a little, even as little as 1% better. You can learn more at vishalkhandelwal.com and safalniveshak.com. One of the best books that inspired me to keep going after I quit my job in 2011, which is almost 12 years back, to work on things I cared more about and loved was Seth Godin's book, The Icarus Deception. In this book, Seth writes about the story of Icarus, whose father, Daedalus, fashioned two pair of wings out of wax and feathers for himself and his son to fly out of a prison they were captivated in. Now, Daedalus tried his wings first, but before taking off from the island, he warned his son not to fly too close to the sun, nor too close to the sea, but to follow his path of flight. However, overcome by the giddiness that flying lent him, Icarus soared through the sky curiously. But in the process, he came too close to the sun, which melted the wax. Icarus kept flapping his wings, but soon realized that he had no feathers left and that he was only flapping his bare arms, and so he fell into the sea. Now, the Icarus myth is often used as an example of when hubris or overconfidence of flying too high can go badly wrong. However, Seth Godin in his book points out that there is another part of the story. Icarus' father Daedalus also told his son not to fly too low, as the water could also damage his wings. Now, as per Seth, and I quote, society has altered the myth, encouraging us to forget the part about the sea, and created a culture where we are constantly reminded one another about the dangers of standing up, standing out, and making a ruckus. However, he writes, settling for too little is a far more common failing. Now, like Daedalus advised Icarus, we all have the potential to do great work in life. However, to do so, we need to leave our comfort zones, to fly closer to the sun, and to fail sometimes. My guest today, Swanand Kelkar, is one of the few people I know of and have interacted with who has left his comfort zone, who left his comfort zone in 2020, who took a sabbatical from work at the peak of his career to live a life out of his bucket list. In today's conversation, I have a lot of questions for him on his sabbatical and the lessons it left him with. But before that, let me make a quick formal introduction. Swanand is managing partner at Breakout Capital. In his earlier roles, he worked at Fidelity, HSBC, and an India affiliate of Deloitte before joining Morgan Stanley Investment Management in 2007. He worked at Morgan Stanley for 14 years, rising to managing director, overseeing a roughly $3 billion portfolio. Several of the Morgan Stanley funds he managed ranked in the top decile of emerging market performers between 2014 and 17. Swanand is a graduate from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and is a chartered accountant. He's a rare multi-talent. He's also a certified yoga instructor and a club cricketer. With this and no further delay, Swanand, welcome to the 1% Show, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thanks a lot, Vishal. It's a pleasure being here. I really look forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Anand. Now, though I've introduced you formally, can we start with a bit of background from yourself? Where did you grow up and how were your earlier years like before you got into work? Also, when you look back at your past and growing up years, which are those most important dots you can connect that brought you to what you are today?
Thanks again for doing this. I love the story of Icarus. I mean, I haven't read the book, but yeah, I mean, you make a very valid point that we are told not to fly too close to the sun, but rarely are we told not to fly too close to the water either. And I think both those aspects are equally important. So I think it's a fantastic story. So going a bit into my own background, I mean, I grew up in Mumbai. I grew up in this western suburb called Villeparle. and it was a very standard childhood, I would say. My father worked for a PSU, my mom was a school teacher, and I think that was the era of hands-off parenting. So parents were not very deeply involved in every minute of what the child is doing. So it wasn't really a curated childhood, the way I see a lot of childhoods today being very curated, where parents, I think, individually take responsibility of either entertaining or educating the child. So every waking minute of the child has to fall into either of these two buckets. So there was none of that. I think there were a few ground rules, which were that dinner is served at 8:30 p.m. and you have to turn up for dinner, and you have to do reasonably well in school. And at no point in time should either of the parent be summoned to school. You have to ensure these two, three things, and apart from that, you are just left to your own devices to do what you want to do. So I think that was sort of the setup. I think what in hindsight, I mean, all these things are very evident in hindsight, and a lot of your childhood experiences play a big role into what you become eventually growing up. And I think this hands-off parenting and the unsaid sort of line from my parents that you go figure out what you want to do, I think made me a practitioner of a lot of things, right? So I try and go and dabble into multiple things because that's the way I was told to do things, or I was instructed to do things. That okay, you figure out what you want to do in this afternoon in the month of May. You figure out how you want to entertain yourself. So there was very little supervision from that standpoint. So I think that is something that has influenced me even growing up. That I will dabble with things. I am not somebody who will sit in an armchair and just think about life. I mean, I try and experience life. So I think that's something which has which whose seeds were sown in my childhood. The other thing which I remember, and it was a typical middle class family where I never had to worry about where my next meal is going to come from, or I did not have, or I was not going to any fancy places, or didn't have very fancy stuff around me. But I never felt a need for it either. So it was a very contented, middle class sort of a childhood. But the one thing which I remember very clearly from growing up was that our house was filled with books and periodicals, and we used to get two newspapers a day. We used to get India Today and Sportstar and multiple other things, and none of it was curated for a child. So it was what my dad was reading, it was what my mom was reading, and I used to open read all those things. So it wasn't as if let's bring in a book or let's buy a book which is suited for a 12-year-old. I don't think my parents ever thought in that fashion. So if I asked for anything, they would get it for me. But they never said, okay, let me give these books to my child. It was a journey of self discovery, and I think that's just helped me to cultivate a diverse sense of curiosity. Is what I would say. That I read I read in Marathi, I read in Hindi, I read in English, I read crime fiction, I read young adult literature. I started reading in Rand, I think, too early. I mean, and I got bored because I didn't understand a lot of it, so I kind of kept it aside. But my dad didn't say that, why are you reading Fountainhead right now? He was like, okay, read if you want. And then I realized it was too much for me, so I kept it away. Uh, I think the learning for, I mean, just a thought here, and there's no learning per se, but what worked for me, I think, is if you curate too many things too early, I think you do the child a disservice. I think let that child have as many different wide experiences as possible. So I think that reading and reading widely, learning by doing, or just tinkering with things and trying to figure things out, I think those things have stayed with me through my growing up years. And I think the one thing that my mom always insisted is she tried to instill values by doing. She was never somebody who used to deliver long sermons on what you should do, but you could see her work ethic. I mean, when she committed a time to someone, she really made an effort to be there at that time. You could see how she wanted to always excel at things, as it used to always say that if you are doing something, it should bear the mark of your quality. You should always be happy, or you should always have made the best effort in delivering what you have been delivering, not taking shortcuts. I think those are things that I learned by seeing her rather than being taught, and I think those again have remained lifelong with me. So just to give a brief quick CV, so I did my bachelor in commerce, then I did CA, went to IIM Ahmedabad, and have been on the buy side ever since. So that's really what you will see on the CV. But I think some of the underlying things were this. I mean, I would not have my childhood any other way. Sometimes I look at some of the young people and I wonder, without saying it aloud, how do these kids not feel suffocated with so much attention and so much parenting? But it's just a different era, I guess.
No, I completely agree. I think having gone through almost a similar childhood where the parents not minding what the child was doing, just being careful of that they're not doing something very adventurous or risking their
Absolutely,
lives. I think just
absolutely,
taking care of the downside, and the upside is for you to achieve whatever you want to do. I
yeah,
remember coming from a very small town of like a less than 2 lakh people population, right? Straight to a city like Bombay of more than 1 crore population. My father did not take a minute to say, you do whatever you want to do, go. Not in a negative sense, but in a positive
yeah,
sense that
yeah.
it's your life to make and please go ahead. Right. So I also wonder, I'm a parent of 2 kids and I see kids all around, peers all around, right? I see the kind of over parenting that's being done today, right? Which the kids are not willing to listen because of that suffocation, as the word that you rightly used, right? So I think those are great lessons for any
Yeah,
parent
I
or
mean,
for any.
I just would, I mean, I would just caution that there is nothing right or wrong with either way of parenting.
That's right.
I think it's just the experiences that probably you had and your children are having, which are very different. But they will have a bearing on what kind of adults they turn out to be and you have turned out to be.
I'm sure. I'm sure. You said you come from a middle class family, but in an article in BQ Prime 2 years back, you wrote about owning the most expensive washing machine in the world. I know the backstory, but I would like you to give that story here and the lesson you took away from that purchase.
So it's an interesting piece in the sense it was. I almost wrote it because of there was this FNO trading frenzy which still exists today. But in 2021 when I wrote it, it was like sort of out there everywhere, and people trying to make quick buck everything. I mean, just trying to do intraday trades, etc. And I wanted to write this piece just extolling the virtues of long-term investing. And what it ended up to be was this piece ended up becoming documenting my journey as an investor. Uh, and the washing machine story is is funny in the sense that I made my first serious investment. By serious investment, not in terms of how much money I put into it, but a bit of research that went into it, a bit of understanding of what the company is about, what the balance sheet P&L looks like, was Sri Cement. The first real investment that I made in my life went to zero. So it was in a tech company in the peak of the TMT bubble. Like any retail lamb to the slaughter, I bought it pretty much at the top, and that investment went to zero. And then for the next 2 3 years, I did nothing because I said, okay, I need to study this a bit. So in the first year of my B school, I bought Sri Cement shares. And it was not the Sri Cement that we know of today. It was something which was, repairing its balance sheet. I think it was in BIFR at some point in time there, and had come out of it. And the shares were selling at some 200 rupees thereabouts per share, and I bought 20 shares, 4,000 rupees. And had done some analysis of the cement industry. I was doing articleship, and during my articleship, I had done the audits of ACC, etc. So I had some understanding, and that stock had done really well. So in by mid 2006, if I'm right, that 200 rupee stock had gone to about $1,000, and my investment was now worth 20,000 rupees. And it was when I was getting married, and we were going to stay in a nuclear setup. So we had rented this house, and we were trying to buy some uh, consumer durables, some washing machine, microwave, that kind of thing. And we said, okay, I'm going to get married next month. We need to buy a washing machine. That's what Prerna and my wife decided. And we had like properly split who's going to buy what, because she's a chartered accountant as well. So she said, okay, I'll buy the microwave, you buy the washing machine. I said, okay, fine. And I remember this very clearly because I didn't have a lot of money at that point in time, but I had investment and all those things. And I sold Shri Cement shares, all 200 of them, and got 20,000 rupees. And almost money for money, I bought a washing machine the next day, which is why that correlation has sort of formed in my brain that this is not a washing machine, but these are 200 Shri Cement shares. Is an association that for some reason that got formed in my head. And every time I look at that washing machine, I end up computing its value in my brain. which is why and we still have it today after 17 years of marriage. We still have that same washing machine, which is, I think, an endorsement of IFB more than anything else. But every time I look at it, I mentally calculate how much it is worth. It's an idle exercise. You shouldn't think about it that way, but it's just an idle exercise, and that's why I call it the most expensive washing machine in the country, which we which we still own. So it's just a funny story. And my wife sometimes asks me that, okay, will you stop staring at it? I know the story, so it is what it is. You should know. You just get on with it. So that is the story behind.
That's right. So moving from washing machine, I think a lot of people also compare that if you stop having one cup of coffee outside every day, you can accumulate a lot of money and invest on all those kind of things,
I
which is not really a reality, or you should not
I
really go by those stories because you still need to live your life rather than thinking only about stocks and
I
investing.
entirely agree with you. I entirely agree
That's
with
right.
you. This association has formed in my head because it happened the very next day. I mean, I am not a fan at all of stories that if you, instead of buying X, you had bought the shares of X, those value of those shares would have been that today versus the value of this would have been. So I feel that all these things cannot come at the cost of your individual happiness or convenience. This is just, I mean, just because you have an Excel spreadsheet and just because you have a numbers, you're trying to fit everything into this one single way of looking. So I think it reminds me of that old line. So for the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I think that's just a wrong way of thinking about it. But this is just a funny association that's been formed in my head, which is why it kind of keeps coming back to me.
That's right. In that article, so again, connecting with the story of washing machine and selling early because you needed the money, right? But you also talked about holding periods, right?
Yes.
And why it's so difficult for so many people to hold on to their shares, high quality, low quality, whatever, rather their portfolio of investments for a long period of time, even when they can hold on to their gold or their FDs till maturity or their real estate forever,
Yes.
right? So, in your experience, what leads people to? You talked about some reasons, but in your experience, what leads
Yeah.
people to actually dabble in shares, trade in, trade out, and not handle them like they handle their real estate portfolios
Yeah,
and
so
gold?
I think that Manjar line about investing being simple but not easy. I think the genesis of that is in this, right? So the what part of the investing is generally simple, right? What kind of shares should you buy? What kind of investments you should make? And there's enough and more literature out there, and most of it generally makes sense that you look for a reasonable amount of ROE, reasonable amount of earnings growth, reasonable valuations, and if you get these three things together, I think what's the simple but the not easy part of it is the how of it. So you know what to do, and that's just not for investing. I mean, even if you, let's say, embark on a fitness journey, you will always know how to do it, right? I mean, you will know that you need to eat a certain diet. You need to know that you have to do certain exercise. The difficult part is the how part of it, and that how part of it is because of emotions. The how part of it becomes difficult because of fear, greed, anxiety, volatility. All those things are the. I mean, I think Morgan Housel has a great line where he says that that's the fee that you pay for compounding. Is the fee of bearing the volatility, the fee of sitting with your anxiety, the fee of sitting with your fears or sitting with your greed and not doing anything. So the reason people trade in, trade out, I mean, if you have a genuine need for that money, fully understand that. But the reason people trade in, trade out is because of this whole, you know emotional turbulence that you are going through, and it makes you do things. But you know that the simple part is I need to just hold on to this thing for a fairly long time.
Uh, you've also written about, I think written a lot in media and Mint and other
Yeah.
publications. In one of those, you wrote about your ground rules for personal investing.
Yes.
Uh, please talk about those ground rules and also what caused you to arrive at those specific rules.
Yeah, so I think I'll be lying if I told you that those ground rules came out of some big epiphany. Those ground rules were more functional ground rules, and I'll tell you what those rules were. Those rules were that for before buying anything, be it professionally or personally, I will write a rationale. I will actually write a rationale on why I'm buying or selling something. The second thing is, in my mind, the holding period of anything that I'm buying will be forever, a at least on day one. I don't want to, sell a good quarter and then come back and buy a bad quarter or do something of that sort. And the third thing, as I told myself, which was sort of a corollary of this, was that I won't do any event trades. I will not buy any special situations where some demerger, merger, takeover, insider buying, something of that sort is happening. I won't do any of that. Now, the reason why I had devised these things was because of my day job as a professional investor. It did not give me, frankly, and it's true even today, it doesn't give you a lot of time to monitor your personal portfolios. Right? So the idea here is to spend minimal amount of time and yet have some good stocks which you own for a fairly long time in your personal portfolio. So these are the ground rules that I made. Write a rationale. Your holding period should be forever. You will not go into any event sort of a trades. So when you do all these things, what you're ensuring is that you're looking for a really long runway of growth, a reasonable management, which is competent and doing what it can, and some sort of a competitive advantage. People call it mode, but I call it a competitive advantage. And if you put broadly ticks on these three things and you ensure that you don't getting in at crazy valuations, that's all I wanted to do. There was nothing more than that. And I was happy to sit through periods of underperformance. I was happy to sit through periods of noise like regulatory changes, management personnel coming in and out. So those were my sort of ground rules for personal investing as well as professional investing. In professional investing, it becomes a bit different because you are measured against a benchmark. That measurement happens very frequently, which is why you need to do certain things. But on my personal side, these were my absolute ground rules. And I also in that article wrote about one of the first serious money investments which I made, which was Chola Investments, which I CIFC, which I now own. I still own it for almost 12 odd years, and is just followed that mantra of hopefully owning it forever, not churning in out, nothing, just kept holding it.
Hmm. So the first ground rule, or one of the ground rules that you talked about, I just wanted to seek more clarity on that, right? So you talked about writing your main thesis, writing a rationale for it. So it's like, is it like 100, 200 word kind of a thing? And if that is the case, what exactly do you write about your investing, or what your
it,
about
it can
decision that you're
be,
about
I
to
think,
make?
to each his own, right? So how you write your rationale is up to you. I have seen people who do voice notes of their rationales, which is also great. Maybe you don't need to physically write, but the idea of a rationale is to form a sort of a circuit breaker between your emotions and your investment decision. Right? Typically, what happens is you read something, or you hear something, or you meet a management, and managements are generally good at selling their shares. They're good at talking up their own story. And what happens is you're so enamored, and you come out of that meeting, wanting to buy right now because your emotions have taken charge. And when you sit down to write a rationale, you just realize that when you sort of activate system 2, as Kahneman calls it, and put on your logical brain, you start thinking, look up numbers, try to write why you want to do what you want to do. I think you realize it's not that great a story as you thought it was. I mean, I remember wanting to write a hand on my heart rationale for something that I had really liked after meeting a management. I just couldn't put the numbers together. So it's just sort of a circuit breaker between emotions and actions. That's the main work of a rationale. The way I write it is I'll describe the company in a line or two. I try to describe the long-term competitive advantages, or why it will make superior ROE, or what is the moat. Describe it the way you want to. But the first part of it is about why do you think this company will make superior profitability or superior return? I mean, what is it? It could be brand, it could be distribution, it could be a state monopoly, it could just be the part of the cycle that it is in. That's the first part. The middle part is about growth. Where do you see the growth runway for the industry as a whole, and within that industry, how will this company fare? And the third part is about valuations, where they stand, etc. And I put what is known as a very loose conviction review price. Right? So let's say something is trading at 100. You've done some basic number work, which typically tends to be a 12 to 18 month sort of a number work, 1 to 2 year forward sort of a number work. and you peg some sort of a multiple there, or you peg some sort of a DCF number there, and you put a review price, which is not necessarily a sell price. So let's say you bought something at 100. If it goes to 150, I'm going to look at it again to see how the thesis has panned out, how has actual happened versus reality. And at the same time, I'll also look at it if it goes down to, let's say, 80, uh, which basically means that now I'm not going to look at it every day. So I just have an alert system, which I will put for stocks. Say that, okay, you own this stock, you bought it at 100 bucks. I'll get an alert if it goes to 80 or 150. Apart from that, I won't look at it.
Hmm. I think writing, as you rightly mentioned, writing your rationale is such a important, such a powerful, and still an underrated activity for investors. You can fool yourself when you're just thinking about things, but when you actually get down to write those things by
Absolutely.
hand, and I
Absolutely.
personally benefited by writing stuff by hand and not on a computer, because when you write by hand, right, and you remember the kind of emotions you were going through when you were making that investment, whether it turned out to be a mistake or not, that's a different story. But writing about things, going back in history and reading and rereading what you were thinking when you were
Absolutely.
making the decision actually helps you
Absolutely.
clarify so much about yourself.
Absolutely. Can't agree
And
more. And I've seen some of your beautiful handwritten notes which you
those,
sometimes put out.
those are simply notes to myself. And I think it also goes with the fact that being an investor, I think the one of the best parts of being an investor I have felt for myself is that I've also grown as an individual and a thinker and a decision maker in the past many years, whether it's about reading Buffett, Munger, or so many other legendary people, how they made decisions, what have gone wrong from them, how they have dealt with the mistakes that they made in life. So it's about how do you grow as an individual. And I think you've also written this very important, very nice statement saying that when you are in investing, you come seeking blessings of Goddess Lakshmi, but you stay for Goddess Saraswati, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? So, I understand some things about that, but please explain. This is a very insightful thought. I think people would really love your
No, so
ideas
I
on that.
think I think that is a very underappreciated facet of long-term investing. That if you own the same company for a multiple number of years, your understanding of not only the company but the sector in which it operates grows exponentially. And the reason for that is once you have committed some money to it, at least at a fundamental level, you are going to closely track what is happening. You are going to interact maybe once in a while with the management. You're going to ask questions. And the more you own it, the sharper those questions are likely to be. Uh, they are not going to be very generalized questions, right? So, just to carry on with the example of Chola, and I mentioned that in that article as well, that my whole framework of how to analyze a lending business has actually been developed through my multiple interactions with the Chola management, or going through some of their presentation materials, or going through some of their investor disclosures. That entire framework has been developed by owning the stock for that long and interacting multiple times, right? So you deepen your knowledge of the company and the sector that you own. Once you own it for a very, very long time, right? You become almost very good. You become at par maybe with some of the best practitioners who are doing that company or sector by owning it for a long time. You make money, you do not make money, that's a separate outcome. But you, as I said, you get in there seeking the blessings of Goddess Lakshmi. But I think the underappreciated part is the best blessings of Goddess Saraswati, which you get when you hold a stock for a very long time.
That's wonderful. So for people who are not from India and who cannot differentiate between Goddess Lakshmi, so she is the Hindu goddess of wealth and prosperity, and Goddess Saraswati is the Hindu goddess for knowledge and wisdom, right? So that's what Swanand was talking about. That's the benefit of thinking like a long-term owner, thinking like a long-term investor. That it's not just about wealth and prosperity; it's also, and it probably turns about more about the wisdom, the practical wisdom that you achieve in life, and you become a better thinker and a much more wiser person as you become a much
Absolutely.
more wiser investor. So, Anand, from investing, I would like you to take into the part about sabbatical, right? So now there are a lot of questions which I have about something unusual that you did. I have not seen,
Yes.
I've not heard of many people at the peak of their career taking a break from work, a conscious decision. I'm sure a lot of ifs and buts would have come across your mind when you were taking that decision, right? You were at the peak of your career,
Yeah.
right? So you did that at 2020, in 2020 at age 40, right? Because you
Yes.
wanted to be a time billionaire, as you said.
Yes.
So tell us about the idea of being a time billionaire. How did you prepare for that, and what specific events or circumstances led you to decide to take that sabbatical? And just
Also,
one more question about
sorry,
that.
yeah.
Were there any pivotal moments or realizations that prompted this decision?
So no, so let me take that second one first. There were no, it wasn't an aha moment. It wasn't as if, it just came to me one day saying that, okay, I need to go on a sabbatical. It was something that was playing in the back of my mind for a fairly long time. And uh, again, the reason for that was the kind of career trajectories that all of us have had. And a lot of it is very similar, that you go from school to college to you do a post grad, then you do maybe an MBA, then get into a job, right? It's almost like structured for everyone, and it is one competitive exam after the other where you have to spend a lot of time on acads, you have to spend a lot of time studying and all those things. And I just refuse to believe that humans are unidimensional. I mean, I am much more than my job. I am much more than just an investor. And I have always believed that all of us have different facets. Uh, and I knew this even when I was a child, but I didn't get enough time to maybe explore all these facets. I mean, I am reasonably good at a lot of ball sports. I like to write. Uh, I also am very curious about multiple different disciplines which weren't part of my educational background or career. So I said, okay, all these things, you kind of relegated to a later bucket when you were growing up. Then you will do it later. When things are, you have enough time, and that later is never coming. I mean, you either say that, okay, this later is never going to turn up, or you say that later is now, right? This is later, and I have these things, I want to do these things, I want to explore these things, and I want to take some time off for this, from my work. And my work is not me, and there is more to me than my work or my day job or what sort of pays my salary. And I have to be clear here that this wasn't coming from a place of boredom. It wasn't as if that I was bored with investing, and I think the proof for that is the fact that I have come back to investing after taking the sabbatical. So I wasn't bored with what I was doing. It was just that there are other aspects of life apart from just my day job. And a day job, as you know, an investing day job is a 24/7, 365 sort of a job. You can't really carve out a lot of time to pursue anything very seriously. You can dabble in it maybe over a weekend. I wanted to spend some more dedicated time on it. So this was always there in the back of my mind. I think the couple of things which helped was the fact that yeah, not having kids in this limited context was a blessing. So it was a decision made by two people, which was my wife and myself. And there were not many other considerations from it. And I was in a place where financially taking a year off wasn't going to dent anything. And I had worked towards it. That at a certain age, I want to get to a place where even if I don't get a single rupee or not paid at all for a year, that's not going to hamper either my lifestyle or anything of that sort. So all these things put together, I said, okay, later is now. I need to do this. And very supportive boss. I mean, Ruchir Sharma, who was my boss then, who's my boss even today. I think he was very supportive of this idea, and that's how I embarked upon it. But at the same time, I prepared for it, as you said. I mean, I spent time thinking about, just a white sheet of paper sort of a thinking that if Vishal today I told you that for the next 1 year, you can do exactly what you want and nobody else is going to have any claim on your time. Not kids, not spouse, not employer, not parents, nobody. Right? This time is yours. And let's assume an unlimited amount of money with you. What will you do in those 12 months? And answer is not as easy as you think it is. A lot of people say that, okay, I'll just lie down in Goa and sit in. I mean, I can assure you that within 7 days you'll be bored. You cannot do nothing for more than 7 days if you're a normal, a working professional the way you and I were at that point. So uh, I think thinking through is the more important part of it. What will you do? What you will not uh, do? How are you going to spend that time? And I actually spent a lot of time thinking about it, which is how I created the structure for the sabbatical. I originally intended to do 12 different things for 1 month each. COVID happened, that sort of put a spanner in the works, but I still managed to do some 8 things out of those 12. So I had zeroed in on my teachers in advance, I had zeroed in on what exactly I will do, I zeroed in on how do I want to have a finale for each of those things, that sort of a culmination of all that I have done. That planning phase was almost a year. Uh, before I actually embarked on the sabbatical. So yeah, so I don't think it was. I mean, when I was doing it, it didn't feel like a big deal, frankly speaking. It just felt like a very natural thing that I would do. So it isn't a story of struggle, unfortunately. It's not as if I have to snatch it from someone, or I had to kind of get it, earn it in a big way. It just happened very naturally, very organically, and I'm very happy that I did it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. So no regrets at all.
That's right. And as I understand, you practice multiple things during this period, right? So,
Yeah,
digital minimalism, you did meditation, yoga, dance, cooking, writing, cricket, right, among other things.
multiple
So,
things.
broadly,
Yes,
how have these experiences impacted your perspective on life as you go about it today? While you may say that you didn't struggle through this entire process and it came out naturally to you, you wanted to bring that later today, right? Whatever you want to do in life during that 1 year period. But I'm sure each experience that we have in life, they impact, or each critical experience that we have in life, which is not mainstream, right? They impact our perspectives on life as we go
absolutely,
about it, right? So, how has that
absolutely.
experience impacted your life today?
Absolutely, multiple learning. So let me just clarify. I think the decision making process wasn't a struggle. It wasn't that and decision, and being allowed to make that decision, that wasn't a struggle at all. But every single activity that I did, especially in the initial days, was an epic struggle. And I wanted to quit everything that I did in the first week, and my wife will tell you that I was miserable. I was like, why am I doing this? I mean, why is this? And I think that is a big learning, that when you put yourself out of the comfort zone, the first few days are terrible, right? One, because you are probably good at something else, especially by the age of 40, when you had at a 15, 16 year career. You are really good at what you're doing. You are very sure footed. You are very confident, like you are maybe doing a podcast. And that has become your natural state of being, to be good, confident, sure footed in what you're doing. And from that, you are put into an environment where you are totally underconfident, you are clumsy, you are in fact anxious about how others perceive you to be. Reality is nobody cares. But try doing a dance with somebody, and your teachers are really good at it, and they are looking so effortless. Some of your fellow students in the yoga ashram were so good. And that first anxiety period is really, really bad. So it is a struggle in those phases. And your mind is always telling you to quit. Your mind is saying that, why are you doing this? What's the point? What are you trying to prove? So I think those things were, so again, coming back, the learning from there is that anything new you are trying will be uncomfortable, no matter how passionate you are about it. Right? Let's say you say that, okay, I'm passionate about biking, and for the first 10 days that you bike seriously on all those roads and everything, they'll be like, why am I doing this? This is a rain shine, so much gear on my head. Why am I doing this? So I think you have to go through that period, right? Sometimes this concept of taking to something like fish to water uh, is not true. Is Rarely does a human take to a new activity like fish to water, unless you are very young, in which case it might happen. But in your 40s, forget it, right? The first few days are very, very hard. So I just wanted to clarify that part of it. I think how it has impacted me, I would say, in a very generalized sense, it sort of reduces your ego. It makes you much more caring about outside than the inside, right? I mean, once you are in a high paying, high flying sort of a job, like it or not, you develop an ego. And once that gets sandpapered in multiple ways at multiple points in time, I think that just stays with you. That sandpapering of the ego is a very, very is something that I experienced those entire 12 months. Right? That, okay, you you might be something in one sphere of life, but you are really terrible here, and it just makes you a bit more receptive, bit more humble, a bit more, open to ideas, open to different ways of thinking, open to figuring things out in a different way than what you are used to. I think that was one big learning. I think on a practical basis, my weekends are much richer now, right? Because I'm still continuing with my cricket, I'm still continuing with yoga, I still write a bit. So earlier, my weekends used to be either meet up with friends, go have a drink, go to the mall, watch a movie, shop, and that was that. I mean, that was a standard weekend for. But now I have to really plan my weekends. I think much more than my weekdays, because I have so many interests, and I want to not do any of these that I have sort of cultivated. So I'm very happy. I just feel my life has become richer in terms of the kind of experiences, in terms of how I'm allocating my time. Right, I'm allocating my time exactly to stuff that I want to do. I am not a passive recipient of how my time is being allocated. I'm not just drifting along, sitting on the sofa and going down Instagram reels. I really like the fact that I'm, at least for the most part, making a conscious effort of where to put in my time. So at a broad level, I think those are the two or three things which I feel very happy about.
I think that's such a wonderful insight, right? Trying to take control of some parts of your time in terms of what you want to do, rather than though, in a broader sense, we generally have control over nothing, right? But trying to do stuff your way, right? Trying to figure out what you really want to do with the limited amount of time that we all have. I think that's a insight. I think worth listening to again and again. And you rightly mentioned about that idea of sandpapering or ego when you're trying new things, and you understand that you are probably average or below average in those things. You may be a superstar in something, right? So, I remember writing a note about being average in an age of alpha some years back,
Yes,
and I think that was an inspiration from a post from Mark Manson on his blog, where he drew a normal distribution curve, and he said that most of the time, right, you will be average, right? Even if
yes,
you're an investor or the best basketball player, you may not be the best in the entire world. You may be average, or you may be the best basketball player or best cricketer or best footballer or investor, but you may be average at in your relationships, or you may be
yes,
less than average in everything else you do in life. So settling
yes,
for that average, right,
yes.
and realizing that by trying out new things that you are not the master of the universe, I think that really tones down your ego a lot, and you start up looking at the world with a new pair of mental models, a new pair of eyes. And I think that's the reason I think having such kind of experience is so important, so necessary in your life after you cross, say, 30, 40. Because as you
Absolutely,
said,
I
when
agree
you're
with you.
young, right, you think you are master of the universe everywhere, but as you move towards the next phase of your life, the midlife crisis, as they really say, that's, I think, where you need to come back and find out where you're average, where you can become better, and this is just one life that you have, right? You
Absolutely.
take control of some things.
No, I think
So
I asked myself a question. I mean, in the last 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, what made you the most uncomfortable?
uh-huh.
And I think seeking out those discomfort zones is important. Uh, Otherwise, going back to your Icarus example, right? Then you are flying too close to the water. You are being very safe, right? If you are not feeling rubbed in a certain way, you are not feeling some discomfort, and the discomfort need not always be physical. That discomfort can even be try uh, going for a impromptu poetry session. I mean, if you are not good at it, or try to go read a short story to a group of people who do it regularly. I mean, you will feel the discomfort, you will feel the nervousness, uh, you will feel the uh, I don't want to be here, get me out of here sort of a feeling. And I think that's very important to get that feeling periodically.
That's right. You mentioned that you are broadly a much better human being, a much better, much more calmer and composed, and a person with lesser ego, right? After your entire
Human
experience
being,
of
I don't know,
sabbatical.
but yeah,
I'm
the,
sure.
the ego's got on sandpaper, that much I can
That's
say.
right. But is there a specific incident or encounter from the sabbatical that you want to share that actually profoundly changed the way you view life and the world?
There were multiple sort of realizations or aha moments, right? That this is interesting. But the one incident which stands out, right, which sort of answered a lot of my questions in a way, was with my yoga teacher, and she was then based in Madurai, and during the yoga class she used to always tell you a couple of interesting thoughts and things like that. And one day she just quoted this passage from Yoga Vashishtha, which is Lord Ram's teachers is Vashishtha, and the script, the Yoga Vashishtha is his teachings to Ram. I mean, that is sort of his uh, what he taught Lord Ram. And then in that there is this paradox of the crow. So the story goes as follows: that there is this crow who sits on a branch of a palm tree, and at that exact same moment a coconut falls down, and it is assumed that there is a traveler who's sitting below the tree, and that coconut helps the traveler quench his thirst, right? So the coconut is useful to the traveler. So the question that Vashish asks is, how should the crow think about it? That did his action of sitting on the palm tree make the coconut fall down, in which case he was instrumental in making the traveler quench his thirst? Or was the coconut going to fall on its own, irrespective of whether the crow sat on the branch or no? In which case the crow has no role to play. I mean, the crow cannot claim any credit for quenching the thirst of that traveler. How should the crow think about it? And this is not a very frivolous question, right? This is about saying all of this is a random video game. Whole life is like these random things happening around me. Do I play any role at all in this entire thing, or is it just a random thing which is going on? And I think the answer is very interesting, and I think it is quoted, that quote is attributed to Buddha, and it says, "Act as if everything that you do matters to the world, at the same time knowing that anything that you do doesn't really matter in the overall scheme of things." Right? So holding those two thoughts together at the same time, right, is very important. These are seemingly antithetical thoughts. They are moving in opposite directions, but that is the truth, right? Because if you say this world is a random thing, I can't do anything, you won't be motivated to do anything at all. And if you are believing that, okay, I am the one who caused the traveler to get the coconut, that leads to ego, that leads to the high beta emotions of feeling exhilarated and feeling disappointed because you feel you are doing all of these things, right? But having this balance, right, you act as if everything matters, but at the same time know that nothing matters. I think that was like a big aha moment for me in that entire sabbatical, saying that, okay, at least now that I have a framework to think about this, right? I at least know how to go about doing these multiple things that I'm looking to do, and then one day feeling that, but what is all this, right? And existential sort of angst or existential anxiety that you get. So that was a big sort of a moment for me during that entire sabbatical.
I'm glad you talked about the book Yoga Vashishtha. I think I interviewed Vinod Sethi in the second episode of this show, and from Morgan Stanley again. Maybe there's a
Yes,
relation. And
yes.
that was one book that he highly recommended, Yoga Vashishtha.
It's a very slim book. It's
That's
like it's a very small book. It's not. But it is a very dense book in the sense, if you read it, like casual reading, you're going to feel like, what is this? I mean, I'm not getting anything out of it. But it is actually it's a very loaded book.
I am sure it is. I'm sure. Uh, you're related to money. You work from in the finance industry, and I'm sure during your exploration into yourself during that period of sabbatical, and even otherwise, did you also pursue an exploration into this cliche question of whether money can buy happiness? Right. In general, how have your thoughts changed over the years? Not just from sabbatical, but when you started out in the finance industry, when you started thinking about money and happiness over the last, say, 15, 20 years, how have your thoughts changed about this pursuit that we all have of material wealth?
It's an interesting one, actually. Uh, I think the answer is going to be very subjective, and what your relationship with money is also a function of your personality type. But I feel there is research. I think there is research about this, and I think it is Kahneman who had done this research, that till a certain level of income, money and happiness is positively correlated. Right? If you are struggling for the basic needs of life, it is unlikely that you will be happy. Uh, and that intuitively makes sense. And that number, I think they had at that point in time, maybe I might be wrong about it, but was some $100,000 or something, and in the US context. that till that level of annual income, your money and happiness is directly correlated. After which it sort of starts flatlining, in the sense that if you get more than that amount, that really doesn't add incrementally to your happiness. But that's just one way of thinking about it. So the way I am built as a person, right? Even when I was somebody with very limited means growing up, at no point have I felt that if I had more money, I would have done this, or I would have bought this, or I would have. At no point of time have I felt that in my entire 43 years of life that I need more money to be able to afford this car. I need to be have more money to be able to stay in this part of the town. Uh, I really haven't felt it as strongly as maybe some other people feel. I mean, in movies etc. You see people standing outside shop windows and drooling at a car or drooling at a dress or drooling at a suit. Uh, that's something very alien to me. It doesn't really it hasn't happened. So that's just me. So I feel that happiness has got to do with money till a certain level, till you're not really struggling in life, right? Till that point, I think money is important because happiness cannot happen without at least having reached a certain level in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I agree with that, and I have sympathy with that. So money can't buy you happiness is a line that typically a rich person says. It isn't a line that a poor person says, and you understand why that is. But I also like the sort of a mathematical definition that happiness. I mean, I read it somewhere. I don't know where, but it's about happiness is described as, or happiness is defined as what you have divided by what you want, and lot of your pursuit is about increasing the numerator, right? What you have. You now have this car, now you want a bigger car, then you get a bigger car, you want an even bigger car. But the true key to happiness is minimizing the denominator of what you want, right? So if it is what you have divided by what you want, I think if you can minimize the what you want, that is a better way of reaching lasting happiness than just being on the hedonic treadmill of trying to increase the numerator.
I'm sure that's a great insight, Fanan. Thank you. Uh, in the chronicles that you've written, in the journal that you've written about, again, your sabbatical, right? You talked about your time spent learning yoga, and this is a question about how do you connect this concept with investing, right? So
Yes.
you wrote, and I quote, "What makes any practice, including compounding, so hard is that on a daily basis there is a boring nothingness, and you still have to keep at it." You also wrote, and I quote, "People talk about the exponential benefits of playing the long game, but the long game is really a series of many boring short games, and one has to develop some strong inner dialogue to counter the boredom and not throw in the towel." So please talk about that boring nothingness that gets to so many people when they are either doing yoga or investing in the stock market. And how have you learned to get over it, to make rational decisions, to prepare yourself to reap the exponential benefits of playing the really long game?
Yeah. So I think this thought came when you get these WhatsApp forwards, right? That had you bought Wipro shares in 1991, they would have been worth X crores today. Uh, and you get to see the result of compounding with the benefit of hindsight is always spectacular. But you, when you are living through that, I mean, what do you do for those 30 years, right? Basically, it's asking you to do nothing for 30 years. That process of compounding. And that is when it is really boring, right? You just watch your Wipro shares every day and do nothing about it, right? And it's a very, very hard thing to do. So I think that is where that thought basically came from. So the way to play the long game, right? And it will be marked by long patches of boringness, no matter what long game you decide to play. The daily activity of a long-term compounding process is very boring, very mundane, very routine. Right? Nothing is happening. Even if you're trying to improve your headstand, on a daily basis, nothing happens. Right? It's like immeasurable improvement. But it compounds, right? That 1%, which is the title of the show, that 1% on a daily or a yearly basis is nothing, but compounded over 100 is a lot. So I think the first thing to play the long game is to play the long game which you really like, uh, which you will play irrespective of the compounding outcome of it. So let's say I don't like gardening. You can't make me play the gardening long game. I'll find ways to wade out of it. I'll find ways to excuses to not do it. Right. So the first thing is that select a long game which you intrinsically like, which you will play irrespective of what the outcome is like. So that's the first one. I think second is once you have decided this long game, try to make a regimen out of it. So don't have a existential question every day that why am I doing this? Why should I be doing this? Should I be doing something else? Just sign on to a regimen saying that okay, I like yoga. I want to play the long game in yoga, which is why every day I'm going to do 1 hour of this practice. So don't wake up every day with questions. So make some sort of a, if you're in the investing field, decide, let's say you're reading diet, or decide that I'm going to meet one company every week, or I'm going to meet one analyst, or I'm going to read this every day, every week, whatever. Just make a regimen out of it. Don't have scope for daily decision making in this part. And the third aspect of playing the long game, I would say, is measure very infrequently. uh, I think if you measure the progress of your long game very, very frequently, if you're weighing yourself daily in your weight loss journey, I think it's quite likely that at some point in time you're going to lose motivation and you're going to throw in the towel. Right. So I think these are the two, three things that find something that you're passionate about, create a regimen for yourself, stick to it, almost with fanatical zeal. And the third thing is don't measure frequently. So I think those are the how do you overcome the and I think the most important will be the first. Find something you like.
That's right. I think your words or your ideas reminded me of the Zen story I heard some time back about this young person who wanted to learn martial arts, right? And he goes to a Zen master to learn that thing, and he says, and he asked the master, if I dedicate myself to learning this martial art, right? How many years would it, or how much time would I take to become like you? And the teacher said, you will take 10 years to become like me. And he said he was not really satisfied with the answer. 10 years was too long. It was too long a game for him. And then he asked, okay, what if I spend like 15 hours a day, 18 hours a day every day? How much time will it take me or become a master like you? He said, now it will take you 20 hours, 20 years in the sense. So this guy was a bit perturbed. I'm spending more time. I'm more dedicated. Why is the time increasing, right? Then okay, what if I do it 24 by 7, all days a week and 24 hours every time I devote to learning the skill? How long will it take now? And the master says, now it'll take you 30 years. And the guy is shocked. He says, the more time I devote, the longer it takes. How can that be possible? I think the master has lost his mind. And he asks this question, why is it so? And the master says that if you are working with one eye on the goal, right, then you are not focusing on the system or the schedule or the task at hand, right? So the way I relate it to investing, and I think you said it right, that a lot of us work with deadlines, right? Or target prices. For example,
Yes.
I'll sell this share at a target price, or this is a deadline for me to finish so many companies or meet so many companies, or to become a great investor. I give myself, say, 1 year 2 year down the line, right? I think what I have benefit from personally, and I've seen so many of my friends and other people who've done really well in life benefit from, is rather than having a deadline, if we can just stick to a schedule, right, of what we plan to do, where we plan to head, right, and just take that one step or become 1% or 10% better in a year. I think that'll take us long beyond what we actually imagined we would reach, probably beyond that as well. So right, so I think
Very well said.
that's I think such an important insight. And I think playing that long game, like you said, through that boring nothingness, right, that separates the real players from
Absolutely.
everyone else, right? So I
Absolutely.
think if someone really wants to uh, pursue that wealth creation and follow that idea of becoming the next Warren Buffett, yeah, you have to dedicate that next 50, 55 years of your life to keep playing that game, whatever the naysayers are saying and whatever the world is doing around
Yeah.
you.
And get comfortable with boredom is what I
That is
say.
true. That is true. That's, I think, the greatest killer of investment returns. People get bored easily, and they lose their mind and they lose their money. So That's wonderful. Talking about edges, I think I have long believed that there are three edges, and I've written about it. An investor can have. The first is information edge, that you know more than others, and I think that's a very short term in nature. The second is analytical edge, where you can analyze better than others, which is not sustainable too, because people are smarter than you, and there are machines that have learned to become or analyze mix and analyze situations much better. And the third is, of course, the behavioral edge, where one behaves better than others, which is, I think, the only sustainable edge to have. You've also written about in the past that any superior long term investment return will be 80% from out behaving others, 15% from out analyzing, and if you are charitable, as you said, 5% from out knowing. Now, you also wrote that despite this truth about the source of returns, time spent by investors is the mirror image, which is 80% is spent trying to outknow, 15% out-analyze, and if you want to be charitable, 5% on out-behaving. So, my question to you is, how can an investor get over this addiction of out-knowing, understand the limits of out-analyzing, and learn how to out-behave in the pursuit of satisfactory long-term investment returns?
No, I think this was this piece that I wrote for Bloomberg was just two pie charts actually. It was
Mm-hmm.
time spent by investors, which is 80 out knowing, trying to get the latest juicy piece of information, 15% out analyzing, 5% out behaving, whereas your investment outcomes are more from out behaving, as you rightly summarized it. So I think it's easy to understand why so much time is spent on out knowing, right? It's exciting, it is thrilling. You read some obscure piece of news on some website or some article, or the CFO stays in your building, he told you something, or your entire pursuit of outknowing is driven by this need of yours to feel special, or to be a part of, or to feel that I'm part of this club of really tight people who really know about this. And once you get that feeling, more often than not, you will act on it, right? Because it is very hard to have what you feel is a superior piece of information and not act on it. So I think that is where a lot of these mistakes happen, right? When you feel that you outknow something, you also suspend critical thinking. Right? If the CFO has told you something, why are you going to even see if it makes sense? You're just going to take it as gospel truth. So I think why outknowing is exciting is easy to understand. Right? You just feel a part of a club, and you end up paying through your investing mistakes. I think by out behaving, what you mean is, as I said earlier, right? Cut out the emotion in the investing as far as possible. I think that is really the core of out behaving. And different people have expressed it in different ways. I mean, be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. It is basically don't get swayed with the emotional herd at that point in time, or the emotions of that entire herd at that point in time. Right? That in a way that to me is out behaving. Out behaving is keeping your head when everyone is losing theirs. Has been again another investment goal. So I think that to me is out behaving, and for that, the best way to develop your out behaving capabilities is to have some sort of an action replay. As you rightly mentioned, we were talking of rationales earlier. That the one thing that writing down a rationale allows you is an action replay. And that is the closest that we as investors will ever get to having an action replay. I mean, all sports people get to see their frame by frame, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. We never get to do it. We never get that technology. So when you write what you're thinking, right, wrong, correct, incorrect, it sort of becomes a dossier of the way you have thought about things or behaved in past during investment. You're investing. And I think that is where you can weed out your biases. That is where you can start behaving better. If you can see your action replay, that okay, I sold this at the bottom of this panic because I panicked, and I panicked because I did this. I read this. This was my thought process, which means that the next panic when it happens, you are likely to behave better. But if you just go from panic to panic in a frenzy of action, that learning is never going to happen, because you've never really watched the action replay or never really thought about the action replay. Right. So one of the ways of out behaving is to be able to look back analyze, see what went right, see what went wrong in a dispassionate way, and try to inculcate some of the learnings from that process into your decisions.
You've been in the markets for almost 2 decades now, probably more than that. And being an analyst and observer of the markets, Indian global markets and the economy, you've also seen the Indian economy very closely as it has followed its cycles over the past 2 decades. Now, to take a long-term view again, not a short-term view, where do you broadly see India of say 2050? On one hand, we have the challenges of a burgeoning population, bureaucracy, and the lag against other emerging countries in terms of innovative technology. On the other, we have a thriving startup ecosystem. We have the demographics in our favor, and we have a much more democratized opportunity set. So, where, according to you, do you see the India of 2050 broadly? And are we really more resilient than we were, say, a couple of decades back?
So 2050 is always a hard thing to forecast, right? I mean, it's easy in a way that it is 25 plus years out in the future. So whatever I say, how does it matter? I mean, who's going to hold me? I mean, I'll be, how old will I be? I'll be 70 by then, so it doesn't really matter. But what I'll tell you, I'll tell you how I characterize the current situation, right? Uh, just as I feel that this is India's World Cup to lose, right? So India has to really perform subpar for it not to win this World Cup is what I feel. Uh, I think it is also India's moment to lose in the sense that we have to really screw up something royally over the next 10 to 20 years to not uh, fulfill some of the forecasts that are out there over the next 10 to 20 years. So I think we have a lot of stuff going. Are we better than 10, 15 years ago? 100%. I don't think I have any doubt in my mind. And be it in terms of either your macro vulnerabilities or the kind of growth engines that are in place, you will always have stuff that needs to be improved. I think no country can say that, okay, we are perfect, done. But I think we have come a long way over the past 10, 15 years. Yeah. But does that mean that it is now our destiny that we will become a developed nation by X year? And I don't think so. And sometimes what worries me rather than specifics of where the current account deficit going or how wide the fiscal deficit is going to be is this behavior of, it's as if you're entitled to this uh, uh, to this great things. Those are lined up for you. I think you should be careful of that arrogance. You should be careful of that hubris, because that's what sows the seeds of uh, bad decision making and doing something really stupid. I mean, the history, even macroeconomic history, is replete with projections of countries that were supposed to become developed nations in the past 20, 30 years, be it Argentina, be it Malaysia. You can go and probably look back at some of their ratings in the MSCI Emerging Market Index, etc. And you will wonder what happened there. I mean, how did these lose their mojo? Uh, so I would really refrain from doing a 2050 sort of an analysis here, but I think this is India's World Cup to lose, and this is India's moment in the sun to not grab.
I'm sure, and I think one of some of the biggest beneficiaries, probably the biggest beneficiaries of what India is going to achieve, or probably uh, 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 as India does, as a country, as we do well over the next few decades or few years, as you said, it's our time to lose, and we should avoid playing that losers game, right? So,
Absolutely, and I
uh,
think
uh,
the foundation is just to have the humility, right? I mean, I feel now that we run an emerging markets product, I meet so many India fund managers, and I tell them, okay, I run this emerging market product, and this, that, and the other. And sometimes the response that I get is, ki, what's there in India apart from emerging markets? Uh, sorry, what's there in emerging markets apart from India? I mean, where else are we investing? I mean, it's so it's so simple, it's so straightforward that India is the only place to invest in it within emerging markets. You want to guard against that sort of a thing, right? You are doing well, you are doing the right things. uh, doesn't mean that you develop this kind of a thinking, that what else is there. I mean, everything, I mean, especially now given that China is going through its own set of turbulence, I see a lot of this feeling within especially the Indian fund management community or some of my peers, that, I mean, who else? as the popular rapper said, right? "Maine to Conway." I mean, I see that feeling almost every, which is a good feeling to have. Feeling proud of what you are is good, but saying that nobody else can do it and there's no other place to go to apart from here, I think that's a bit much.
That's right. I think guarding against that sense of entitlement and
Yes.
casual approach that things are all heading up and there's no downside to it. I think that's one risk which I see as well through the India story, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, as I understand, one of the most important skills to strive in today's world, whether you're living in India or anywhere outside the world, right? Anywhere outside, right? It's the ability to change your mind when the facts change, right? We are living in a world where it's in a world of social media, where everyone's almost thinking alike, right? And people find it very hard to change their thought process with the fear of looking bad or looking dull or looking dumb, right? Because everyone is watching,
Yes.
right? In fact, anybody who does not change their mind, I think, is dramatically underestimating the complexity of the world we live in. So, with respect to investing or life, what is the most important thing you have changed your mind on in the last few years, and why did that change of mind really happen? If you can think about that.
Yeah, so I think this is always an investor. In being an investor, I think one of the joys of being an investor is that you are a student for life. Right? You can never really say that I have arrived or I have learned everything there is to learn. And learning also includes unlearning. Learning also means changing, as you said, your past held beliefs and views. Uh, what has been a revelation for me, and I think is I think the John Templeton line is quoted very frequently, right? Which says that the four most dangerous words in investing are "this time is different," right? So, which basically means that you have history as a perfect template for what's going to happen in the future. So, you just need to find the right historical template in the markets for you to be able to predict what's going to happen in the future. I started off with that belief. I started off with thinking that way, right? So, which is why, let's say you look at PE band charts and you say that, okay, this stock has never traded above XP or has never traded above YP. But those PE band charts never consider a zero interest rate world, right? Which is what we have had for almost 10, 12 years. Which means by definition that PEs are going to be elevated because if in your DCF your denominator is close to zero, your net present value is going to be fairly high. So I think Morgan Housel put it. He was one of your guests on your show. I know. I think he puts it very nicely in his book, and he says that the 12 most dangerous words in investing are the four most dangerous words in investing are "this time is different." I mean, history is full of events which never happened before. Uh, and I think that has been a big learning for me. I mean, there is this big school of investing which looks at the past a lot to predict the future. Uh, and I started off that way. I started off, looking at the past very closely to see what's going to happen in the future. And I think you have to loosen those settings then. I think you have to loosen those settings and say that, okay, certain, and again, Morgan also says that certain human behavior repeats, but the specifics of interest rates, deficits, government spending, whatever, the specifics of those things do not repeat. So at a certain yield, you should have a certain PE. I don't believe that. I mean, that's not cast in stone. There can be a high degree of correlation, but that's not cast in stone. So I think those are some of the beliefs that I have changed. Uh, I actually misassessed a lot of companies, and I mean, I can own up to it, thinking that they were very commodity-like, right? So this entire story of cables, tiles, sanitary ware companies, maybe even electrical equipments, etc. When I initially looked at them maybe 10 years ago, I thought that these are commodity companies; they're not going to get more than 10, 15p, and look at where they are today, right? I mean, so I think I was just lazy in my assessment of their competitive advantages. Is what I would say. So I've changed my mind on some of those things, and I think the investing teaches you to be very nimble. Right? I mean, if you are a good investor, you are likely to be a very moderate person in your views. Uh, you are going to hold your views, especially big views, very very lightly, about where the world is going, what's the right, this, that, and the other. I think you should not cling on to them very very tightly. So I agree with you. I mean, facts change. You should change your opinion, and I've done that, I think, enough number of times in life. If you ask me, I have, as I have become older, I have questioned a lot of received wisdom. Right? I mean, as a child, you are told a certain thing, or child, as somebody, or a young adult, you are told certain things, and you receive it because it's maybe coming from someone with from a place of authority. That could be your teacher, it could be your parents, and you take it as received wisdom. You are agreeing to what you are being told because it comes from a person who you have given a sense of authority. But I have tried, I mean, I have, as I have grown older, I have put all those received wisdom tenets under the scanner one more time. And some of them haven't really held up. So, yeah, so those are some of the things that I have used.
Give me an example of a received wisdom that you've changed your mind on in life.
Hmm, to respect elders.
Oh,
I know
wow.
it's a
I
very
was thinking exactly. I don't know. I was thinking exactly like that. I'm sure. So
it's a very
before you
sorry,
answer,
sorry.
just
Yeah,
let me take that chance to think about or
yeah.
talk about.
We are going to so get cancelled, Vishal.
I'm sure we agree on so many things. Respecting elders, and this is what I learned from my wife. I've always been taught by elders in the family that you should always respect elders. I think you should always be kind to everyone, but
Absolutely.
respect should not be determined by the age of the person. I think
Absolutely.
whether he's a
Don't
young
agree with
person or an old person does not make a sense. A lot of young people are much more respect worthy, and a lot of old people are not as much respect worthy. Of course, you should be kind to others. So that's my thought, and my wife taught me actually that it's not the age but the behavior of the person or the character of the person that should determine whether you should respect that person or not. Now your view.
you. Exactly right. I mean, the same thing. Respect is not dependent on age. I also feel that respect is an intrinsic value. It comes organically. It cannot be thrust. As you said, you be polite and civil with everyone, but just because a 70-year-old person is telling you something doesn't make it gospel truth.
Mhm.
uh, you put that through your analytical scanner like something that a 10-year-old is telling you as well.
That's right.
So, if respect elders means blindly doing all that you are being told to do by a person who's higher in age than you, I discard that as wisdom.
Great. I agree with you. We are also living in a world where we see the pace of change is just multiplying second by second basis. And I think even when we compare that with a formal education system, right? Especially when I am a parent and I see how my kids are being taught in school and through the formal education system, we are part of that, right? We realize that this system is largely insufficient to teach, and it's not the system that is to be blamed, right? That's how things have worked out for so many years and decades and centuries, right? But I see in today's world of multiplying change, the education system or the formal system is insufficient to teach all that is required to thrive. So, given that context, what advice would you offer to, say, students when you're talking to them or young adults in self educating themselves? And what are some of the key work and life skills that they must learn and hone to do well in their years ahead?
No, super. I mean, great question. Uh, I think even the regulators, I mean, like RBI, have this concept of a sandbox, right, which means that you can do a limited experiment in a new thing, a new technology or a fintech or whatever. You can do without having full guidelines yet. You can do that experiment with guardrails. I think being a young person, the advantage that you have is that you have infinite sandboxes, uh, that you can dabble in multiple things, you can experiment with multiple things with guardrails and minimal consequences. Uh, and I think young people should take advantage of this fact, right? That you should try your hand at multiple things in a sort of a laboratory setting, and parents should encourage that, uh, to figure out what really works for you. and what gives you, what gives you that click of even happiness, or what really works, makes you feel that this is for me. I think that experimentation is very important at that young age. I think there's this book by David Epstein called Range. I mean, where he contrasts the experience of Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Where he says that Tiger Woods specialized very, very early in his life. I mean, he knew golf was his thing, and his father, and how he taught him, and how from the age of two and a half, three, he was in tournaments and winning. As against Federer, who was playing multiple sports till the age of 50, and he zeroed in on tennis only at the age of 15 or 16. So I think if you're a young person, try everything. Try public speaking, try pottery, try painting, which is not taught in schools, but just put yourself out there in multiple situations. I'm a big fan of doing internships as early as is legally possible, because there is nothing like getting the actual feel of work rather than learning about it in a book, right? So my niece, I think she did an internship. I mean, the day she turned 18, and I think that is a very, very important thing that young people should try and do. And the second is, again, what we discussed earlier, that put every received wisdom under the scan. I mean, some works, some doesn't work, and just be prepared to do it. Do it politely. Do it without burning things down. But I think you should just put every received wisdom under the scanner. What we should develop as a skill, I feel, is in many places, organizations, in society at large, I feel that there is an execution deficit, in the sense that the number of people who can do even a small job really well is a small set of people. And I think in an organization, or even in general in your family or society, you will get noticed if you do even a small job well, right? Do it end to end, understand all the implications around it, be a clear thinker around it. Even if you will remember well written emails, you will remember a well made Excel spreadsheet, right? So how can you strive for that excellence? How can you say that, okay, again, coming back to our earlier part of the conversation, that okay, this is a very small part, I mean, maybe inconsequential in the entire scheme of things, but if I do it really, really well, it's going to get noticed.
I'm sure. I think that wide advice of I received. I think in the conversation which I had with William Green some time back on this podcast, and I asked him the same question, and he says that, and he talked about the advice that he received from Charlie Munger. He says that the way to win in life is to play the games, only those games where you can win. Right, you cannot beat Gary Kasparov at chess, but you can beat
Correct.
him at cricket, for example, or tennis,
Correct.
if he doesn't
Correct.
understand how to play tennis or cricket. Right, but before realizing that this is a game that you would win at, you should be trying out a lot of different games when
Exactly.
you're early. Exactly what you said. I think that's such an important advice. And we are living in the world of generalists. You talked about the book Range, right? So
Correct.
uh, the jack of all trades and master of none, I think, is a great advice in today's world,
Absolutely.
right? When you combine all these different unique skills. And I was reading this book from Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big. And he talked about those 8 or 10 life skills like communication, basic accounting, basic coding, right? Public speaking, grammar. And he said that he even the illustration. He said that he's just averaged all these different skills, but the way he created Dilbert and the way he got so popular is because he was able to combine those average skills, right, and make them something really special, right? So being a jack of all those trades, being a generalist, having a range of different things, when you combine them to do a work really well, I think that's a way to win in life in today's world. So
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
completely
more.
agree with you. Yeah, that's right. uh, I've seen many successful investors and decision makers whom I've interacted with, and even otherwise whom I've read over the years. They practice meditation for mental clarity and focus. And as part of your sabbatical, the first thing you practiced was Vipassana meditation in Burma. In your journal, when you have chronicled your experiences, you've shared something beautiful describing this practice. So you wrote, and I quote, "The whole endeavor is to train the conscious mind to be aware of your sensations. It's like teaching the conscious mind the language of the unconscious mind, and then deliberately training it to not cling to these sensations of craving and aversion by observing their impermanence. This eventually trains the unconscious mind as well to do the same, and that helps you let go of the cycle of craving and aversion. That is, you start dealing with both tunnets and lizards with equanimity. Now, I have thought a lot about this idea of equanimity and how it relates to being a good investor and a good decision maker over the years. And so, I would love to have you explain your thoughts in greater detail and how the practice of Vipassana has made you a more equanimous person in life and as an investor.
No, so great. I mean, so I did Vipassana in Burma in 2019, and I do meditation reasonably regularly now. But the only thing is, I mean, whatever works for you, I meditate as the last thing in the day. So a lot of people do it first thing in the morning, but what I've just realized is what works better for me is doing it at the end of the day. Uh, for me, it's not so much about focus, but it is more about, to put it in financial terms, maybe reducing the beta of your emotions. When you sit for, let's say, 15-20 minutes on a mat and just focus and try to focus on your breath. Whatever mental, the monkey mind as it is called, wherever it is jumping, it will slow down, maybe a bit, maybe not fully, but it will slow down a bit. And once the monkey mind stops jumping with the same frenzy as it was earlier, it helps you put the situation that you are dealing with in a better perspective than with the monkey mind which is jumping all over. So it sort of blunts the beta. It sort of blunts the beta of excitement. It sort of blunts the beta of anxiety, fear, whatever negative emotion that you have, and it sort of makes it a low volatility uh, mental state. I think that has been the biggest advantage of meditation for me. So I had a temper earlier, and that temper used to come primarily from being a highly strung person. That I wanted to. I was always in a hurry. I wanted to do things in a hurry, and if things were not happening, I used to get very irritated. Uh, and things as part of our daily life as traffic or just, and I used to realize that my mental equilibrium is getting dislodged for the next 30-45 minutes, even though the traffic was just for 5-7 minutes. And I said this is not a good state of being, right? That you dislodged your inner sense of sort of peace or calm because of this very extrinsic factor, and that sort of stayed with you for a fairly long time. So the whole idea of meditation for me is that, I mean, I'm not going to say that I have been able to clear my mind of all thoughts in all my meditation sessions. I mean, I would be lying if I say that. But what it's made me is reduce the volatility of that entire monkey mind. It jumps
I
around
think
still, but
that's right.
not
That's
with
right.
as much frenzy.
And investors' parlance that you use brilliantly, reducing the beta of your emotions. I think that's equanimity all about, and such an important character trait for a investor if he or she really
Yeah,
wants to play that long
exactly.
game. Long game, wonderful. Another beautiful part I liked from your journal, sabbatical journal, was this that I quote. Again, it's a long quote, but it's such a nice writing that you've done. You write, and I quote, in the 33rd verse of 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjun not to fret about having to kill his loved ones, for he has already killed them, and that Arjun is a mere instrument. The Sanskrit word for this is more precise, nimitta matra. Of late, I've been grappling with the classic midlife purpose question. I have reached a place of contentment for myself and close family, and the argument is for taking it easy are very strong. But what if I am meant to be an instrument for greater good? Wouldn't being content in limited sense then not be selfish? And since when did an instrument start deciding things? Its duty is to already always be ready for whatever plan it may be chosen for. I have faith that the eventual plan, whatever it may be, will present itself and I have to be ready for it. Now, if there is one question and its answer that I have a selfish interest in out of all that you shared today, this one is it. Because I have grappled myself with this doubt about being content with whatever I have, but still going on with whatever that I am pursuing. and I have not got to a response I would be satisfied with. So I now seek help from you.
Okay, I'm not going to see that I'm going to give you a perfect answer to it, but I'll tell you the background of this, right? When I went on the sabbatical at age 40, I thought there was a bit of purpose drift happening in my life. Yeah. In the sense that in your initial part of your career, you need to make money because you have an EMI to pay, and you have a family to take care of, right? And you are not thinking of questions like purpose at that point in time, and because these are such obvious answers to the purpose question, right? You need to earn money to be able to pay the EMI, which means that your house is not foreclosed and you're able to provide for your wife and family and everyone else. I think our fathers and the generation ahead of us was lucky in that sense that they never really grappled with the purpose question, because it was in a way self-answering till they retire. That you have to go to work because the two kids have to pay their school fees and all those things, right? I think ours is the first generation which is sort of thinking about this purpose question. So, what am I here for? And I think it will become a much more all-pervasive sort of a question as time goes by. So I was grappling with it, that okay, I don't think I'm going to starve now in my life. I am reasonably well provided for, and I don't have this huge needs. So why not just take it easy? Just to do, and that was sort of there in the back of my mind, which is when I heard this verse, right? Of and that word that stuck with me was nimitta matra, that you are an instrument of something. You are not just you. You are not just about what you want and what you achieve and what you do. And that what you are an instrument of is not very clear. And it just maybe clicks at some point in time that you are maybe an instrument for this deed, or maybe you are an instrument for this deed, and that will happen through things coming together at some point in life, which you cannot imagine at this point in time. Which means that whatever gives you joy and happiness, whatever long game you have chosen, whatever is your what you feel is your calling, I think you should keep doing it with all sincerity and all hard work before the grand plan sort of reveals itself at whatever point in time it reveals itself. Right? It comes back to the same Yoga Vashishtha story that I talked about. Right? You have to act as if everything that you do is really important and it really matters. Right? And you can sometimes drift into that other part which says that, does this really matter? This world is a very random place. Why should I even do anything if nothing matters? So I think when you are going into this shell, it's important for you to be able to activate this part of it, saying that no, all that you do is matters. It's important. It's just that you may not know today clearly on how it matters, but it does, and that's why you have to keep pursuing your whatever you feel is your long game passionately. I think that's the sort of thing that I arrived at. I also believe that I also would want to believe that I, I'm trying to phrase this correctly, but I believe in this concept of what is known as prarabdha in Hindu philosophy, which means that you're born with an accumulated set of karma. It is sort of your opening balance of what you carried maybe from past life, from whatever. I mean, that part I'm not very sure of. But why did something happen to me and didn't happen to you? Is a question that has no real answer apart from saying that it's just a random event. I mean, you don't really know what's happening. But I also believe that this prarabdha thing is what you do in your life and how much of it you carry forward into the next. So I sort of have some buy into that idea, although it is not. You cannot write a research paper on it saying that okay, this is this man's prarabdha and this is how it works. But this is just a philosophical belief that I have, and I want my prarabdha to be good. I mean, that's a very selfish way of thinking about it. And I want to start. If this thing is even true, I want to start with a good opening balance.
That's right, and I think that really helps in my search for that response. And uh, the reason I think, if I go back to the things that I'm working on things that really pull me in towards keep working, despite the fact that I am content with what I already have in terms of
Absolutely,
financial and other resources, and the family that loves me and all those stuff. Uh,
absolutely.
But I think the solace for me is, as someone said, that the purpose of life is not happiness, it's usefulness, right? So if you keep understanding that you are just an instrument of being useful to someone, right? And you don't know who won, right? Someone,
Yeah.
right? I think if you just live your life and go through your days just being useful to that one person or one being, right, or someone, I think that's the life worth well lived, I think, rather than always pursuing happiness or in search of happiness that we are, or the books that we read, right? We are always searching for that secret source of happiness, right?
Yes.
Money, fame, reputation, everything.
Yes.
By just being useful and doing the work, and rather than seeking credit for it, I think that's all that is there to life,
Absolutely.
or a happy life,
Absolutely.
right? So
I
happiness
agree.
is just an
Couldn't agree.
accident.
I mean, yeah, we have so much in common. I mean, I'm just through the through the entire course of this conversation, I'm realizing that we have so many common threads in terms of life
That's great to know,
patterns,
Swanand.
thinking.
Thank you. I have been on a sabbatical as well for long now. So maybe it's a result, or maybe people who think alike act alike as well. So the other way around
No,
as
it's
well.
also I think a function of the cloth that you are cut with.
That is true.
It's also a function of that.
That is true. That is true. Uh, Looking back at your journey, you have like 45, nearing 50, maybe. You're looking back at your journey. What's one piece of advice you wish you could have given to your younger self, though your younger self would have not listened to you? But
Sure.
still, if you had to give an advice to your younger self, when you were just starting out in the world of finance and investing, what would advice would that be?
It's an interesting one. I would have given myself a very general advice, right? I mean, uh, so when you start off in the investing world, you don't know a lot, and you don't realize that this is as much, if not more, a behavioral game than a game of science. Right? You tend to cling to the science part of it early on in your financial career. Right? You think that all answers are in an Excel spreadsheet. That if you model something well, you will be able to get the answer of it, and that's not a fallacy that I will want to rid every young person of. I think the realization will happen only with time. The realization will happen only with age, and no matter how much I tell that 25-year-old saying that the 25-year-old is going to think that this is some old foggy who doesn't know how to use Excel, which is why he's thinking. So I think that realization happens with time. I wouldn't want to give that advice to the 25-year-old saying that there is life beyond the Excel spreadsheet, especially in the financial world. But the advice that I would give is what I think the Gen Zs, millennials say these days is you do you. A lot of times people uh, forget or maybe dumb down or maybe mute their actual personality types in order to fit in order to conform to an external parameter of success or to an external perception of what is desired. Yeah, I think we aren't meant to be an army of robots, right? Like, all of us are humans and we have different skills, personalities, different ways of thinking, different things that we are drawn to. And I think the last thing you should do is try to mute it. Or the last thing you should try to do is try to uh, sort of tone it down to blend into something which you have been told is the right way of approaching your career. So uh, I think you should inculcate certain qualities, but you should at no point in time dumb down or mute or dilute anything that is in your personality.
That's that idea about listening to your inner voice, right? With time, I think, or through received wisdom, we try to dump that,
Correct.
or we press the mute button or the on the inner voice and go with what the world expects us to do, right? So I think
Exactly. And
that's
there's
such
nothing to
an
be
important
ashamed
idea.
of in that
Of
I mean
course,
you
yes.
have different facets of your personality, and there's absolutely nothing to be embarrassed about or nothing to be ashamed of or nothing to hide there. All of us are different jigsaws, and neither of us is going to look alike. So there's no point in fact, you will shine the most when you present your true self.
That is true. That is true. Uh, So as they say in cricket, slog overs or the final overs, the last five overs I have, and you love the game of cricket, I'm sure. So five last questions from me. Some with
Fast,
maybe
fast answers.
no, you can take your time. The questions are short, the answers could be long. Uh, First question: what is the single best piece of advice you ever got? And I combine the second one as well. What is the single worst piece of advice you ever got, which in hindsight was a bad advice?
I think I think the worst piece of advice I think we discussed a bit, and a lot of it was part of that received wisdom canon of multiple things that are handed to you just because this is the way it has been happening and this is the way it has been done. So I think it's not really bad advice. Not all of it is bad advice, but you should question. You should put everything, all of that, uh, all of that under the scan. Uh, I think the piece of advice which I got, which kind of stuck with me, was a variation of what I would give to my 25-year-old self, which I said, right, which was you do you. Uh, I realized it made slightly later than I should have, but that's fine. That what makes you you is you. So you uh, do not try to hide it. Do not try to talk it down. Do not try to talk back to your inner voice, as you say. I think that's the best advice that I have received. That what makes you not a robot is your individual characteristics.
That's great. Are there any specific books, philosophies, or thinkers inside or outside of finance world that have shaped your approach to investing and decision making?
Let me start with outside the finance world. I think one book which I felt was crammed with insights, at least for me, was Thinking Fast and Slow. Uh, I think the basic building block of how thinking happens and differentiating between system one and system two, uh, that made so many things fall in place, right? And why you behave in a certain way and why you don't behave in a certain way. So that is something which helped me analyze my own thinking much better. I thought that was it's I would call it a non-investing book, but I think it's a book that is it's dense. It's a long, big book, but I would think it is the Gangotri of behavioral uh, behavioral finance or behavioral science in general. And there are many tributaries that have sort of come out of that Gangotri. So I think that is one book which has been very influential. The other book which I found to be really thoughtful and very well written is called Why Buddhism is True. It is by a person called Robert Wright, and it scientifically tries to answer some of our behavior patterns. Why do we behave in a certain way? And what are our evolutionary seeds to that behavior? I think I just found that book to be fascinating in terms of scientifically explaining certain behavior patterns which might seem illogical at different points in time. So I think that was those are a couple of books which I found interesting. On the productivity self help side, I'm a fan of Cal Newport. So I write. So digital minimalism, the book was what inspired the digital minimalism exercise that I did. I also like this other book called Deep Work. So these are very practical ideas. These are ideas that you can actually implement in your daily life. They don't need you don't need to overhaul your entire way of living to implement some of these. So that's on the non-investing side. On the investing side, I think I one of the first serious long books about investing that I read was Random Walk on Wall Street, uh, which was Burton Malkiel's book. Just a long history of bubbles, medias, things that have happened. And it just got me very intrigued about markets. I read it in college, I think. It just got me intrigued about this whole thing. I mean, who are these people who are trading tulip bulbs? And who are these people who are doing South Sea related company IPOs, etc. So some of those things I think were very fascinating, very interesting. That was a great book. I joined. I mean, from campus, I joined Fidelity. So both books, one by Peter Lynch, which is One Up on Wall Street. But more than that, I think it's a lesser known book. It's by Anthony Bolton called Investing Against the Tide. Those are very practitioner books. Those are books written by fund managers who have been successful, very successful, managing large sums of money for institutions. And I really like both those because they have very practical advice for fund managers, very practical advice for equity investors. So I really liked what they had. I like Michael Mauboussin's Expectations Investing, because that tells you that a lot of information that you want is in the price, and you should be able to read the price to be able to make your investment related decisions. So I think those are some of the books that have been very. I don't read a lot of investment books now, frankly speaking. Um, I end up reading research, but I don't read a lot of. A Psychology of Money is a standout book. I think by Morgan Housel. I think that's one recent investment related books which I read and I really liked. It was just so earthy, straightforward, and yet very insightful.
That's great. Those great recommendation. Completely agree with your list because these are some of my favorites across these different topics as well. So thanks for that. The second last question, which is a hypothetical question, right? And I think I've asked you this before as well, but want to seek your response because our interaction happened last time 8 years back, right? So hypothetically, if you know that you were to forget everything the next morning,
Yes,
right? Tomorrow you're going to forget everything, and you're given a chance to write everything today now, since you remember now, right? What are those few things that you're going to write on a piece of paper so that it helps you restart a new life tomorrow when you're going to forget everything?
very interesting. I don't know what I answered at that point in time. I really don't remember. I don't really remember what I answered at that point in time. But if I were to write everything down on a piece of paper and that were to be, start of my personal constitution uh, in my in my new life, uh, I would write down this story from Yoga Vashishtha, saying that these are these two things that you have to sort of find some way to marry and live your life by. Uh, so I think that is something which has stayed with me. It's been very useful, and I think just write that story on a piece of paper, and maybe just add something really light and funny at the end, saying, "Don't take yourself too seriously" or something of that sort.
Right, in your previous avatar you were too serious. Now it's time not to take yourself too seriously.
What did I write? I'm very curious. What was my answer then?
No, I'll get back to you as well. So
I
I
don't
still
remember.
remember that.
I'm very
Right,
curious what I answered then.
right. I'll share that with you. I'll share that with you as well, for sure. Here's my closing question to you. Everyone walks on their own journey of life, and everyone must play their parts well. But what, according to you, is a life well lived?
Fantastic. I mean, I need to think for because I never really thought of this. Partly because I just feel that I still am in the first half of my life. Is my is my operating assumption at that point at this point in time. But let me tell you a framework, right? I talked about it briefly earlier as well. That in your life, in your initial part of your life, you are a recipient of a lot of things, right? You get you get care from your parents, you get love from your friends, you get teaching from your teachers, you get opportunities from your employer. You are receiving a lot of things in the first half, in the first certain part of your life, and that's probably the nature of the world. That's the nature of the beast on uh, how this evolution happens. I think you have to ensure that you give back more than you have received. And that's not just on the dimension of money, because that's just easy to measure, but it's in terms of time. It's in terms of being a role model to someone, being able to shape someone's life and career, being able to give time, being able to cultivate relationships, being able to help people, usefulness, as you said earlier. The purpose of life is usefulness. So I think I believe that if you are more than able to balance that debit and credit side of life, right, that you have received thus far from multiple sources and in multiple formats. If you are able to more than give what you have received, I think you have taken, at least in a very limited context, you have taken this world forward. You have created a positive balance of goodness. I don't know if it's a great answer, but that's how I think about it. That's how I would say Okay, I think on a net basis, I got this right. I mean, on my deathbed, I would want to analyze my life in that fashion.
That's great. I think that's an insightful answer, Swan. Thanks for that. And I found your response to that hypothetical
Ah,
question about losing your memory, right? So I'll just quote exactly what you said. So you said that that's an interesting question, of course, and I am assuming this is related to investing. So your perspective was about investing. So you wrote, I don't think investing can be learned by just reading a secret code of investing or something. It is just an accumulation of experiences and learning over a long time. I find it interesting that there are no investing prodigies, self made billionaire investors who are 20-year old. The ones that we have a fair degree of gray hair. So it would be really a setback if I lost all my memory overnight, but I don't think leaving back a secret code or something would help. Right. So that was your response.
I answered it from an investing context.
That's right. That's right. So things have changed. You've changed like a river, right? So I'm sure the answers would also
Yeah, I
change.
mean, I think as they say, right, the only permanent thing is change. So,
That is true.
I think,
That's
but
true.
this time my answer was more broader
That is true.
than just
Completely
investing.
agree. Completely agree. So that's all from my side, Swanand. Thank you so much for your time, your insights, and like a sponge, I absorbed all of that. Also, largely because I connected so well with what you really said, your experiences, your thought processes, and your advice and everything. So thank you so much for everything. Right. Just one final thing: if people want to read more about you, of you, right, where they can find you, if you can just tell us some, direct those people to those things, those
I think the
places.
best place to follow on Twitter because
Okay.
all that I have all that I have written, or all that I write, I generally post it up there.
Hmm.
If you are only interested in the sabbatical part, I have collected all the writing that I did around the sabbatical called Sabbatical Chronicles. It was published in Mint Lounge, so I used to write a monthly column for Mint during my sabbatical. So all those writings I have put together in a single document. You can just reach out to me. I'm sure you can share my email ID in the link or whatever. You can reach out to me, and I'm happy to share that document with you.
That's great. So thanks, Swanand, for your time and everything. And I look forward to interacting with you in less than 8 years now.
This
So
was no, this was amazing. Some really great questions, Vishal. Very well researched. It's not as if where's the nifty going from here. I mean, I hate those questions, but really I had fun. I mean, it was a really great conversation. Thank you
same
for
as
this experience.
same as Swanand. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you so much for your time.